Welcome to the Jerome McClain Show. I'm your host, Jerome McClain, and let's get into our episode.
Intelligentsia, the endem of sarcasm, the nutty professor, to your whack-ass marmalade. It's T-Bone from T-Bone and Chick Brew in the morning. Now available in podcast format. Simply search for the T-Bone and Chick Brew podcast, available wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Civil rights icon, the Reverend Jesse Jackson, whose towering presence and vision reshaped the Democratic Party and the country, has died at the age of 84.
America, our time has come.
For more than 6 decades, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr. fought for justice and equality.
I was born in Greenville, South Carolina, in rampant, radical racial segregation. I had to be taught to go to the back of the bus and be arrested.
He was just 24 years old when he began working with Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. in 1965.
I learned so much from him, such a great source of inspiration.
King named Jackson the first head of Operation Breadbasket in Chicago, an expansion of the movement to focus on hunger. Jackson was there.
It was a defining moment in the history of our struggle.
Years later, Jackson broke from King's organization to create Operation Push. In 1984 and again in 1988, Jackson ran for president, becoming the first major black candidate to do so.
We have proven that we can survive without each other, but we have not proven that we can win and make progress without each other. We must come together.
For decades, Jackson had wielded influence among presidents, world leaders, and business leaders. In 2017, Jackson was diagnosed with a neurodegenerative disorder, but he continued to lead his Rainbow Push Coalition organization until 2023.
Legion of what could be.
Angela suggests, she doesn't suggest, she says very clearly that we had an agenda and we fell down. It's clear to me, and I think to most of us around this table and in this room, that black folk, again, we're going to put all this stuff on the table in truth and in love. Black folk were asked to do a lot of things to help elect this president. We were asked by the candidate at his campaign. We were asked by black leaders to do any number of things to help get Barack Obama elected as our president. We were asked to walk precincts. We were asked to give money. We were asked to hold teas and coffees in our homes. We were asked to show up at rallies. We were asked to do a lot of things to help to activate our organizations. Black churches were asked to do any number of things. All of us in Black America were asked to do things to help elect this president. One of the things that's troubling, for me at least, and I want to get your take on this, is, to Angela's point, what black folk have been asked to do since Barack Obama was elected president. Because if we're not being asked by black leaders, if we're not being asked by black organizations, if we're not being asked by the president we elected to get behind him to do A, B, C, D, and E to help him advance an African-American agenda, then it seems to me that all the energy, all the effort, all the resources that we know we have, because we activated it to get him elected, those resources are now sitting dormant. So talk to me about what we have been asked to do, or not to do, as it were, since he's been elected president of the United States.
The good news is that the president sets a high moral bar. So I want to represent all of America. That's a big deal. Most presidents never made that commitment. They represented white male Americans, and then after fight, female Americans, and then labor Americans, and then Native Americans. And so the idea of a one big tent America is a new deal. Within that context, there are some Americans living in luxury and some living in pain. And there must, if your hand is cut to death, fingers cut, you don't wrap the four that's not bleeding, you wrap the one that's bleeding. And so our pain today, even as we deal with the healthcare challenge, and it is a real challenge, that in Chicago, 3,200 Black Americans die a year from health disparity. More die a year in this city from health care disparity than in the 9/11 terrorist attack 10 years ago. Obviously, those in the most pain must have some priority attention. Let's go a step further. Today, Black Americans, while we're number one in football, basketball, baseball, golf, tennis, track, and presidential politics, we're number one in infant mortality. Number one in short life expectancy by 7 years. Number one in home foreclosures. Number one in church foreclosures. Number one in student loan defaults. Number one in credit card scams. And so we need heavy lifting at the bottom of this economy up. I want to stay a little close to your first one about kind of who are we, because the very term black in the context of America takes on a kind of electricity. The term black makes people overreact. Tomorrow, there is a rally in Washington. 100,000 Latinos are marching for comprehensive immigration reform and bilingual education. Of course they want that. That is within a multicultural arrangement. Each of the member groups have primary agendas and they have common agendas. And so tomorrow they'll march for a comprehensive immigration reform, and the White House is deliberating how it handles that agenda. The don't ask, don't tell was the gay lesbian agenda, and that has been addressed. The issue about the bank bailout. We demonstrate they use lobbyists. And their lobbyists say if we fail, America will fail. And so we bail them out. And that was a good thing, perhaps, but it was not linked to lending. It was not linked to reinvestment. It was not linked to honoring civil rights laws. So the banks got the bailout, didn't honor fair lending laws, didn't honor fair housing laws, did not honor did not honor CPA, did not honor affirmative action laws. So these banks, watch this, engaged in something called reverse redlining. They broke the law without any penalty for breaking the law. The same day that the president addressed the matter of Dr. Gates and Crowley on the issue of an incident that took on the media firestorm, that same day, Lisa Madigan, the Attorney General, had a press conference in Chicago filing a lawsuit against a bank that got bailout, but the bank did not lend. That bank targeted blacks and Latino people on South and West Side Chicago. Blacks and browns making $100,000 a year got subprime high-cost loans. Whites making $50,000 a year got low-cost prime loans. The fact is it did not help white or black, because at the end of the day, when we begin to face foreclosure, since every time one house is in foreclosure, 9 houses lose value, we were evicted and couldn't pay taxes. They won the war, and the house was worth more than they were paying for it. So guess what? We began to lose police and teachers and firemen and librarians. In some real sense, the black agenda is the American agenda. That's why I like the idea of his being America's president. Most American presidents have not been America's president, and so deal with the members of that family and based upon priorities and pain. I would say lastly that the black agenda is the humane agenda. It is the lost sheep agenda. It is the democratic agenda. It's the healing agenda. It's the offset the hypocrisy agenda. The idea that some people are 3/5 of a human being, and that blessed by churches and politics and scholars, and others were 7/5. They taught some people to be superior and conditioned others to be inferior. Our struggle was a struggle to even the playing field. Why are we so dominant in football, basketball? But it's hard to be the best basketball player in the world. It's hard to be the best, but the reality is that there's something now going on called March Madness basketball. We dominate, but May Sadness at graduation time. What is the disparity here? Why are we so good on the court and so weak off the court? Because why are we so good? Whenever the playing field is even and the rules are public and the goals are clear, the referee is spared, we can make it. But when you look at where we are today, the rules beyond the playing field are not fair. So the black agenda really is America's, and I might add in closing, Dr. Ron, is that our agenda has never been the left agenda. It's always been the moral center. The 13th Amendment in the slavery and indentured servitude, it was the moral agenda. The 54th decision pulled down walls for all locked behind both sides of an artificial wall made by law and culture. The Voting Rights Act of 65 was not just the black agenda driven by blacks, but guess what? White women couldn't serve on juries. Farmers who couldn't pay the poll tax couldn't vote. 18-year-olds couldn't vote. You couldn't vote residency where you went to college. We had to democratize democracy and have proportionality. And so I would say to you that the black agenda is the moral center agenda. That in slavery time, if the right said, treat them as you want to, they are your property. The left wing said, be kind to them. That's the left. Our agenda was end that system. We must end the system of oppression. And I say to you today that the black agenda is winning. From ending slavery, to ending legal Jim Crow, to the right to vote, to electing a president. Our agenda, the moral agenda, is marching on. We are a better nation because of our morally centered. Our agenda is good for the healing of America. Our agenda has never been exclusion. Our agenda is the canary in the mine. We've always been that force that has been good for America's redemption, and we remain in that coveted moral position.
Reverend Jesse Jackson.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Has anybody ever told you you were over-opinionated? How about this one? You can talk about everything you like, but don't talk about religion. Don't talk about faith. Don't talk about politics. My name is Jerome McClain, host of Jerome McClain Show, and I want to introduce you to a show called Over-Opinionated with my friend from Southwest Virginia, Josh Scott. Josh has always been told he has been over-opinionated. He always tried to hold back these opinions, but he tried to back them up when he had to say something with facts and logic. Since he's grown up in many ways, he had to change a lot of his views and his opinions, as a lot of people should. He's not a millionaire from Fox News or CNN. He's just a hard-working, blue-collar type of guy. Give Josh Scott a shot at Over-Opinionated with Josh Scott. You can find him on patreon.com/overopinionated at 679. You can also check him out on Twitter at NRV_guy79. Over-Opinionated with Josh Scott, where he is this soft-spoken guy telling you the truth. We talk about a lot of serious topics on this show. One very serious topic is women's health. One company that stood out to me was vslay.com because the owner is very transparent about her own struggles in the women's health department and has great customer service, great deals, and frequent sales. You can check her out, her great customer service, products about women's health, and frequent sales at www.vslay.com. That is www.vslay.com.
Reverend Jackson, let me ask you a question. You can answer any way you want to answer, but I've got some issues here that we've been discussing. I want to get all this stuff on the table. You have run for the White House twice, 84 and 88. Some of us worked on that campaign. Many of us supported you in those runs for the White House prior to Barack Obama. The notion these days inside of political circles, the notion inside the body politic is that if you're black and you're going to run and win, and many black folk are forced, as you know, to run in districts that are not as black as they used to be. So if you're going to run in a district that ain't black or is not as black as it used to be, Reverend Jackson, you're going to have to run a different kind of campaign. Your name is in every one of these articles. You can't run a campaign like Jesse Jackson ran in 84, 88, they say, if you want to win and get elected. And in these articles, they point out people like Barack Obama, Deval Patrick in Massachusetts, Cory Booker in Newark, New Jersey, Artur Davis now running for governor in Alabama. These are the names that, Adrian Fenty in Washington, D.C., these are the kinds of names that come up and they say, Reverend Jackson, you can't run a campaign talking about a black agenda these days if you're going to win.
Well, I won Vermont. I won Michigan. But that's not the deal breaker. I'm concerned that even in our passion, because many of us have not talked this out in these last 2 years, and I hear a lot of the tension between our joy and our pain, the joy of the President's victory and the pain of how do we handle the crisis today. We are on the attack today. The latest data is that hate crimes against all minorities are down 19%. It's up against blacks 8%. Today, when many small towns have lost their farms and their businesses, there are 2.4 million Americans in prison, those who've been there a year longer, and 1.2 are African American, and 500,000 are Latino. And they are now counting those blacks in those small town prisons in the census as being citizens of that community. Therefore, they get from our being there reparation. They get registration, representation, and they get resources. I'm concerned that some of our own internal wounds between us and our other partners, we must heal some internal wounds because we cannot go forward unless we have a full deck. And if the wounds are there, we begin to lose our spirit. A&T, bless my school, we celebrated a month ago 50 years since the sit-ins at the Woolworths. And yet, there was an African-American mayor woman, Mrs. Johnson, became the first African-American mayor in that city. And there are 10,000 students on that campus eligible to vote. And the election day, 200 voted, and she lost by 900. So the hope coming out of our balloon is a factor. So in some sense, the appeal today is for the president to hear our appeal to revive the enthusiasm and the hope and the unity. Now, part of this politic thing today, on your point about coalition, what links us? Why did Dr. King call it Poor People's Campaign and not Black Campaign? Why in that last staff meeting you had, there were whites from Appalachia, we're coal-mining dies every 6 hours a day, and Native Americans and some of Sharp Business Group from Southwest, and some Jewish allies from New York, and some blacks. Why? Because he knew that if you isolate the agenda and don't wrap it tightly, it'll be shot down just on its very essence. So that today we need this. Poverty is expanding. There are more whites in poverty than blacks. When John Kennedy held up a black baby in his arm in Harlem, it was dismissed as he was trying to peel the atom power. When Robert Kennedy held up a white baby in his arm in West Virginia, in Appalachia, that baby's bloated belly and tears touched America differently. It was a different response. Poverty, 40 million Americans in poverty today. 1 million children go to school homeless every day. 50 million have no health insurance. 50 million more do not have catastrophic health insurance. 20 plus million are unemployed today. And so there is expanding poverty. We must address in a direct way. 50 million Americans are food insecure. That's to say that they cannot get 3 balanced meals a day. In our schools in most cities, 85% free meals a day, which means they deserve breakfast and dinner, not just lunch. So poverty is a big deal, which we must address. And that takes it beyond black can be the stimulus for that, but we don't have a monopoly on poverty.
President Obama would say, though, Reverend Jackson, he's working on the healthcare issue. He's tried to do everything he could for black folk, and all Americans and Republicans have obstructed him in that process. That's what he would say.
And he's correct, because they are operating as obstructionists. No president has ever gone to a caucus like he did in Baltimore and faced them head on with the cameras rolling, and they hit him. It was like a snowflake on a hot stove. He just simply outthought them and made more sense. But they are the a pre-existing condition of tearing his administration down. Then he came back and said, let's have 5 and 5 in the White House. a pre-existing condition, their agenda is obstruction, not health care. And so there is this issue of resistance. My point I'm trying to get to this is that when I look at these cities, because there are some forces not on the table, but when Gingrich came in 94, he saw people like Kathy Hughes and Bob Johnson persistent buying these radio stations, and you show me a Harold Washington, I'll show you a WBON. You show me a Dave Dinkins, I'll show you a WLIB. His first act was to stop the tax relief so blacks did not own in mass media. That was his first act. The second act was, watch this, in cities above 200,000, they cut off all urban transportation subsidy. Cities below 200,000, you get subsidy. That's the emerging suburbs under 200,000. So today you have 1,200 bus drivers and transit laid off in Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, cutting one through the service in Atlanta, Georgia. We're being choked by a bill of 94. We must know that that cap got to be lifted. Secondly, Brother Tavis, if you cut off transportation, they're closing schools. We're about to move toward 4-day-a-week schools. You cut off transportation, cut off education, cut off public housing, cut off public post offices, now cut off public health, that beyond the president himself, he is a petition between us and some forces that are very much trying to take the election back next year that they lost last year. My appeal is simply this to us today. Why I think we should support the health care bill? Because that's on the table today. That's what the Black Caucus is fighting for today. Why? Because it's not only that 32 million more people have health insurance, there are glaring omissions in that bill. The issue insurance companies are taking us for a loop at this point, but if we win the bill, we can have laws and stop them if we win. The hospital's $2,000 a day for a bed. We can take that on. Pharmaceuticals, you get a medicine, $200 in Canada, $1,400 here. It's affects us disproportionately. So what am I saying to you? I'm saying this. Issue of expanding poverty, racial disparities, a reconstruction plan bottom up, as in a war on poverty bottom up, and stop the global military budget. That was how I made the case all of us today. We must rally behind that bill, because if that bill loses, if he loses this fight for the health care, we lose public education, public transportation, public post office, public option, and civil rights. So sometimes politics gets very particular. The stakes are higher than the bill. I said today, even as we jostle to get our positions clear, don't miss the politics, the health care, and obstructions in 2010.
I'm coming, Angela, 1 second. Dr. Malvo.
So, welcome to the Darrell McClain Show. Of course, I'm your host, Darrell McClain. Let's just say it, since we've been on vacation, independent media that will not reinforce tribalism. We have one planet, nobody is leaving, and let us start back reasoning together. So, the show has run for about 5 years or so, non-stopped. And basically what happened is I decided is that what I was going to do is take a sabbatical the day before the anniversary of my father's death. So I did that, and I did enjoy it, but there of course was a lot of things going on that I paid attention to, even though I did not put my mouth on. I didn't particularly want to say everything that needed to be said. A lot of stuff, I had takes, I had opinions, and I decided as well, not everything needs my voice for a take, and a lot of stuff I just wrote about instead. So of course, we have the passing of our dear brother, the now late Reverend Jesse Jackson. What I thought was very telling about that moment was I had just started a series about the Reform community, and I was talking about some of the issues surrounding this narrative, that gets recycled every Martin Luther King Day, and why it's very important. And that series is still going on, as well as a lot of other things. A lot of the pieces that are actually have been coming out are pieces that I actually wrote before I went on sabbatical and stuff that I was writing while there, because I had a lot of time on my hand and a lot of thoughts in my head and a lot of heavy stuff on my heart. So we're going to get back to the politics of it all. We're going to get back to the philosophical applications of it all. We're going to get back to the ontological roots of it all, and we're going to get back to the psychology of why we do the things we do, why we behave the way we behave. And we're going to try to, like we always try to, shape this conversation, at least on this show, in love and in the hope of unity. And we're going to start going forward just like we used to, with some more information. The So You Think You Can Debate thing will be there. The Blast with the Intellectual Past will still be here. Gonna do the Blast with the Intellectual Past in long form, with like I left with some of the old lectures I've listened to that I think are still present. Speaking of that, the thing you just heard from Jesse Jackson, Reverend Jesse Jackson, the late now, it was from 2010 in a conversation amongst very different black leaders, and it was hosted by the then, I think it was PBS talk show host Tavis Smiley, and it was called We Count. Now that in its entirety, which is worth listening to because of some of the people that were there, and this was 1 year after Obama had been elected, and they were reflecting on everything that needed to be done, etc., etc. And when I go back and listen to stuff like that, it allows me to see what aged well, what did not, and some of the prophetic things that were said that turned out to be absolutely true. And if we would have listened to people like Jesse Jackson in 2010, I postulate that we would not be where we are right here in 2026. So that is kind of what I always say, that we used to say when we were growing up in the South, at least: those who do not know their history are doomed to repeat it. But it's also those who do not know the signs of the times are doomed to set themselves up for failure, and in doing so, set their communities up for destruction. And there goes the community, also goes the United States of America. When it comes to Jesse Jackson in particular, I want to say this. We lost one of the last giants of a generation that did not tweak their courage, they bled into it. Jesse Louis Jackson Sr., Reverend, is gone. And whether you agree with him or not, whether you loved every word he ever spoke, or whether you rolled your eyes at half of them, you cannot deny this: he was the man in the arena. He lived in the arena, not online, not in theory, not in safe theological rooms, not in meeting halls, not with safe people. He lived inside the arena. Born in 1941 in Greenville, South Carolina, in Jim Crow, that was not a documentary to him. It was the actual oxygen he had to survive in. Segregation was not a chapter in a textbook. It was the architecture of his actual childhood. And out of that architecture came a preacher who understood something that many modern theologians and many modern activists want to forget. Faith without confrontation is nothing more than decoration. Jackson didn't inherit a comfortable Christianity. He inherited a dangerous one, a Christianity forged into the black church, where scripture was not an escape hatch from injustice. It was a weapon against injustice. And yes, we all know he walked with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was there in Memphis. Let that all sink in. When Dr. King was assassinated at the Lorraine Motel, something happened in America. The prophet in the King tradition and the country died. And the country began sanitizing King almost immediately. They made him safe. They made him soft. They turned him into a dream without any demands. But Jesse Jackson refused that embalming. He carried forward the economic justice message. He carried forward the Poor People's Campaign the King had started. He carried forward the idea that civil rights without economic rights is nothing more than public relations. And let's talk about that part folks still don't want to understand. His presidential run in 1984 and in 1988 were not vanity projects. They were insurgencies. When Jackson ran for president of the United States, he did something that reshaped the Democratic Party forever. He expanded the voter registration among the poor and the marginalized. He built what was called the Rainbow Coalition, not as a slogan, but as a strategy. And that piece is the piece that people miss. And of course, from my perspective, I think they miss it on purpose. The Rainbow Coalition was not about colors for optics. It was about a shared material condition that we all have to go through. It was him trying to say black workers, white farmers, Latino laborers, urban poor, rural poor, students drowning in debt before debt was fashionable to talk about. He understood something prophetic. If you keep poor people divided by race, they will never recover and they will never recognize their common enemy. And that was his central thesis. And let's be honest, that thesis today is still threatening to those in power. So let me speak plainly to you and let me tell you the truth, because on this show, we do not canonize men. We examine them. Jackson, like all of us, was not perfect. He's a sinner saved by the grace of God. He made mistakes. He had controversies. He had moments that disappointed even his supporters. But here's the part modern culture struggles with. A flawed man can still alter history. We have become so obsessed with purity that we dismiss impact. We cancel legacies without understanding the terrain those legacies had to cross. Jesse Jackson was not an Instagram activist. He negotiated with dictators. He advocated for hostages abroad. He stood against apartheid when it was inconvenient. He challenged American foreign policy when it cost him political capital. He understood that moral authority requires risk. And here's something else that deserves to be said plainly. He believed politics was a tool, not a religion, like a lot of people practice today. A lot of people in the evangelical community have replaced their religion with political ideology. And that's the damn truth. He wasn't naive about power. He knew the system was flawed, but he also knew that disengagement guarantees they make you irrelevant. So he organized, he strategized, he plotted, he planned, he researched, and he registered voters. He built an infrastructure. That road right there, infrastructure, movements die without it. Tweets don't replace infrastructure. Hashtags don't replace infrastructure. Viral outrage does not replace infrastructure. It does not replace it. It doesn't do anything. It is just rage shouting into the void. Infrastructure, and as Parkinson's disease slowed Jesse Jackson's body in later years, you could see the cost of longevity. Imagine living long enough to watch the voting rights erode again, to watch wealth inequality explode again, to watch the moral language of justice co-opted and diluted for PR again. And yet he remained not as loud as he once was, not as physically strong as he used to be, but presence. And there's something holy about endurance. Now, here's the question that this generation must wrestle with. Are we organizers or are we commentators? Because there is a difference. It is easy to critique anything from the sidelines. It is harder to build coalitions across disagreement. It is easy to say both parties are corrupt. It is harder to organize inside an imperfect system to extract tangible gains. Jackson chose the harder path. And I'll say something else that might make some people uncomfortable. Jackson believed in America enough to fight for it. That's not contradiction, that is maturity. You can critique a nation because you expect better from it. That is different from abandoning it. Jackson believed the Constitution could be expanded in practice to watch its rhetoric and to match what it said it wanted to be on paper. He believed democracy was not fixed, it was contested. And he believed participation was not optional. So let me bring this home. We are watching a generation that inherited voting rights without knowing what it cost. We are watching a coalitional politics fracture under the weight of identity without strategy. We are watching economic injustice widen while cultural debates dominate headlines. And the man who spent decades trying to stitch together poor and working class Americans just left the building. Forever. So what do we do now? We can eulogize him, or we can study him. We can repost quotes, or we can replicate the discipline. Because as Martin Luther King says, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it does eventually bend towards justice. But King also said, the moral universe does not bend by admiration. It bends by organized pressure. And Jesse Jackson spent his life applying pressure imperfectly, publicly, relentlessly. So rest in peace, Reverend Jackson. You ran hard. You ran hard. You ran when they laughed at you. You ran when they dismissed you. You ran when victory was mathematically impossible, because sometimes the point is not to win the office, but to widen the doorway. And to the listeners of this show, hear me clearly. History does not need more spectators. It needs more builders. It needs coalition makers. It needs men and women willing to endure criticism in the pursuit of structural change. Jesse Jackson was not the last of his kind because we lack talent. He will only be the last of his kind if we lack courage. And that, family, is on us. I'll be right back with more on the Darrell McClain Show.
And the pieces together, bound by a common thread, we form a great quilt of unity and common ground. We'll have the power to bring about health care and housing and jobs and education and hope to our nation. I salute Governor Michael Dukakis. He has run a well-managed and a dignified campaign. His foreparents came to America on immigrant ships. My foreparents came to America on slave ships. Whatever the original ships, we're in the same boat tonight. Most poor people are not lazy. They catch the early bus. They work every day. They raise other people's children. They work in hospitals. I know they do. They wipe the bodies of those who are sick with fever and pain. They empty their bedpans. They clean out their commode. No job is beneath them. And yet when they get sick, they cannot lie in the bed they made up every day. America, that is not right. They wonder why does Jesse run? Well, because they see me running for the White House. They don't see the house I'm running from. I have a story. I was born a teenage mother. Who was born a teenage mother? I understand. Wherever you are tonight, you can make it. Hold your head high. Stick your chest out. You can make it. It gets dark sometimes, but the morning comes. Don't you surrender. Suffering breeds character. Character breeds faith. In the end, faith will not disappoint. You must not surrender. You may or may not get there, but just know that you're qualified. You hold on and hold out. We must never surrender. America will get better and better. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. Keep hope alive. On tomorrow night and beyond. Keep hope alive. I love you very much.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Of course, if you want to support the show, you can do so by going to www.patreon.com and getting a membership for as little as $3 a month. Again, that's www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show. The Jerome McClain Show is fully listener-supported, independent media that won't lead you to tribalism. Get a membership and support independent media at www.patreon.com/The Jerome McClain Show.